All right, so here we are going to begin step 5. This task is adding color resources. So far you have learned how to change property values. Next you will learn how to create more resources like the string resource you worked or the string resources you worked with earlier. Using resources enables you to use the same values in multiple places or to define values and have the UI update automatically whenever the value is changed. What you'll learn in task 5 is going to be how resources are defined, adding and using color resources, and the results of changing layout height and width. So step 1, we're going to cover adding color resources. First, you'll learn how to add new color resources. In step 1 here, in the project panel on the left, double click on res values colors XML to open the color resource file. So if you're looking at my screen, this is our right here pen. We're going to click to the values here and we're going to click colors. Double click that and now we're in the color section. This is your color XML file. The colors XML file opens in the editor. So far, 3 colors have been defined. These are the colors you can see in a app layout, for example, purple for the app bar. Number 2, go back to fragmentfirst.xml so you can see the XML code for the layout. Fragment first XML, double click it. We're going to go to the XML portion. Number 3, add a new property to the text view called Android:background and start typing to set its value to @color. You can add this property anywhere inside the text view code. So it's going to be Android:background equals quotation @C, and it should pop up. We're choosing @color/color primary dark. So let me go ahead and do that. So anywhere within this text view is where you want to be. It could be at the end, it could be in the middle, it could be at the beginning. It doesn't matter. Right here, I'm going to press enter at the end of this one and begin typing Android. Colon. What was it? Background. Let me go back. Yep. Colon background. There it is. Pops up. @color. You see it's giving me a list of colors. We want to choose @color/color primary dark and press enter. And now we've created a new color resource. All right, number 5, change the property Android.text color and give it the value of Android color/white. So let's locate Android text color. That's this one right here. We're going to enter color/white. There you go. Having some issues typing it. So here, Android:text color equals @Android:color/white. As you see, I had a little bit of trouble typing it, so you can also, once you do @Android, it should give you a selective options and you can select it that way, the way that I did it, and it should work just fine. The Android framework defines a range of colors including white, so you don't have to define white yourself. In the layout editor, you can see that the text view now has a dark blue background and the text is displayed in white. So let's go check that out. There it is. And we changed that within our XML code. And as you see in real time, our app is reflecting what our code has been, what our code was implemented, or what we implemented with our code right here in the XML file. So this is a great point to make. As you saw when we edited our text view on the design side, we witnessed that the resource code in our XML file was generated for us, and vice versa. When we created our resource text or we entered our code, we saw that our design automatically updated. So they work hand in hand. You can do it both ways. So let's say you're not super strong in your HTML or coding for front end development, you can select you could select your changes within the design view, and it'll automatically do the code for you. So you can see, it this program really sort of helps you in guiding you in the way that you feel more comfortable when you're creating an app. You could do both, or vice versa, or mix in both, or be more heavy on the code or be more heavy on selecting it. Either way, it gives you the option. Okay. Step 2, add a new color to use as the screen background color. Now we're going to go back to colors.xml and we're going to create a new color resource called screen background. It's going to look just like this. You could copy like this, but I would say type it out. That way you get the hang of what you're doing. Here we go, colors.xml. Here is our code for our colors. So colon or less than color name. I'm going to switch back on my screens. Equals screen background. I think I'm missing my capitalization. Yep. Greater than. And in between, you're going to put hashtag capital FFEE58. So right there, hashtag FFEE58. Now we created a new screen background color resource within our colors.xml file. A color can be defined as a 3 hexadecimal numbers, that's this right here, representing the red, blue, and green components. The color you just added is yellow. Notice that the colors corresponding to the code are displayed in the left margin of the editor. That's what I was talking about earlier. Note that a color can also be defined including an alpha value right here, which represents the transparency. And when included, the alpha value is the first of 4 hexadecimal numbers. This is all just information on how colors work and how they're defined within making color resources. The alpha value is a measure of transparency. For example, right here makes the color semi-transparent, and if you use this one, it's fully transparent and disappears from the left-hand bar. So these are just different things you could do with colors. Okay, so number 2, go back to fragment first XML. In the component tree, we're going to select Constraint Layout. So let's do that. Fragment first. I'm going to go just to my design. Constraint Layout. In the Attributes panel, select the background property and press enter. We're going to type C in the field that appears. Sorry. Let me find it here. Which one was it? Background, sorry. Here's background. Type C. And as we see, we created this screen background within the colors.xml. It should be right here. We're going to click that. And now we just assigned the background to the resource that we created within the colors.xml file. In the menu of colors that appears, select Add Color Screen Background, which we did. Press Enter to complete the selection. Click on the yellow patch to the left of the color view, left of the color value in the background field. So right here, as you can see, our background is now yellow. It's asking us to click that. It shows a list of colors defined in colors.xml. Click the Custom tab to choose a custom color with an interactive color chooser. We did all of this. It's the same thing that we did with the text. It's the same way that we do it for the background. 7. Feel free to change the value of the screen color background, but make sure that the final color is noticeably different from the color primary and the color primary dark. Obviously, if you have text, you don't want the background to be the same color as the text because you're not going to see it. So these are your color primary dark. We don't want to make those the same color as our background because we won't see our text. Okay, so everybody's good up so far. Now if we run our app, it should change the background and also create a background for our text. And there's our app. So far, everything we've done so far has been implemented in our app, and we can test that out by running the emulator to let us know that what we're doing is being accepted by Android Studio. And if we were to connect this app to a phone and try to run it, this is exactly how it would look. Step 3, we're going to explore width and height properties. Now that you have a new screen background color, you will use it to explore the effects of changing the width and height properties of views. In fragment-first.xml in the component tree, select the Constraint Layout. Constraint Layout. We're already in fragment first, so it should just be selecting the Constraint Layout button right here. Number 2. In the Attributes panel, find it and expand the Layout section. So the Layout section should be right here. As we can see, pardon me, as you can see, there's a layout width and a layout height. The layout width and the layout height properties are both set to match parent. The constraint layout is the root view of this fragment. So the parent layout size is effectively the size of your screen. What that means is the layout of this fragment, which is fragment first, our first screen, is set to match the parent screen, which is just your regular screen on your phone. If there was no app selected or anything on your screen, you just open up, press your button, turn it on, that's a screen. So it's set to match that. A little tip here, all views must have a layout width and a layout height property. Notice that the entire background of the screen uses the screen background color. That's how our app looks at this current moment. Number 4, we're going to select text view first. Currently, the layout width and height are wrap content, which tells the view to be just big enough to enclose its content, plus padding in parentheses. Text view first. As you can see, wrap content, wrap content. What this means is when we create, for example, the background, see how it's right here? It's this like purple. It's going to wrap this text view component. That means it's not going to change the whole background to that purple. It's only going to be for the select part of this text view. That's what wrap content does. The content hello world will be wrapped in this background. Only this background or only this text view. Step 5, change both the layout width and the height to match constraint, which tells the view to be as big as whatever it's constrained to. The width and height show 0 dp, and the text moves to the upper left, while the text view expands to match the constraint layout except for the button. The button and the text view are at the same level in the view hierarchy inside the constraint layout, so they share space. So we're going to change both the width and the layout to match constraint. Zero dp match constraint. See how it expanded now? For the width, it went to the whole constraint layout. It's going to be equal to the constraint layout. Same thing with the height. Now it took up the exact same constraints as its parent. As we see here, the constraint layout is the parent of text view and button. What that means is within the constraint layout, you have two components here, which is a text view and a button. So they're known as the children of constraint because they're within the constraint layout. So now without any of those constraints and we're matching our parent, it's going to take up the same amount of size as the constraint layout is. You saw how Hello World went and shifted up here. It pushed a button down here. And it also changed the whole background now to that purple. Step 6, explore what happens if the width is match constraint and the height is wrap content and vice versa. You can also change the width and height of the button first. Okay, we'll do that. So let's see what it looks like if I change the width back to wrap content. Now you see the width has adjusted to just where the text field is, our text view, where Hello World begins and ends. And our height still has 0, so it's matching the same thing as the constraint layout. So it takes up all of that. And if we did vice versa, now the height is only the width, or I'm sorry. Now the height is only as high as what the text field is. So our 24 SP. Our text size is as high as what our height is. And let's try this with the button now. To do that with the button, we're in text view. Let's click over to the button. Now we're on the button first. Let's try that again. See, wrap content, wrap content. Let's see what happens if we go 0. Let's see what happens when we go 0. Imagine if you saw a button that big on your screen, you'd be like, what am I clicking to? But yeah, this is a button, and the button's now taking up the whole screen because it's matching its constraint parent. The same way this is saying match parent, which is just your regular screen, your regular phone. Your button is now doing that with the constraint layout, and it's squishing that text field or text view as you see. So let's go ahead and put wrap content for height. You've seen buttons where it extends the whole screen before with, you can add some padding so it's not all the way out. But you see here, this is still clickable, you know? Let's switch it. Now that button takes up all that height and just the amount of width as what the text field is. And this is, of course, like if you were designing and let's say you wanted to make a button extend the whole screen, that's how you would do it. Then you could add your padding and margins so that you give space, but that's one way to shape what your button size is going to be. All right, if you haven't done so already, please set both your width and height of the text view and the button back to wrap content. So we're back on this screen. So these two, layout width, layout height, send it back to wrap content for both. All right, task number 6. Add views and constraints. In this task, you will add 2 more buttons to your user interface and update the existing button as shown below. By the end of this task 6, our screen should look like this. What you'll learn: how to add new views to your layout, how to constrain the position of a view to another view, and we'll do that starting with step 1. Step 1, view constraint properties. In fragment first XML, look at the constraint properties for the text view. This looks like constraint bottom, constraint end, constraint start, constraint top. So let's go to our fragment first. And here, right here in our text field, constraint bottom, constraint end, constraint start, constraint top. Button, as you notice, also has the same thing. Constraint bottom, constraint end, constraint start, constraint top. Right now we're looking at the constraint properties for the text view. These properties define the position of the text view. Read them carefully. You see it's matching, it says constraint end parent, constraint start parent, constraint top parent, and constraint bottom at ID button first. You can constrain the top, bottom, left, and right of the view to the top, bottom, left, and right of other views. Select text view first in the component tree and look at the constraint widget in the attribute panels. So this is going to be within our layout and constraint widget. Let's go back to our design screen. Text view, layout, constraint widget. So this is going to give us the option to change some of our constraints here. As you see, our constraints are parent, parent, parent. The bottom is the top of button first. Isn't that how it works? Our text view is above our button. What is below the bottom of our text view? Button first. All right, so you all should be right here now. The square represents the selected view. Each of the gray dots represents a constraint to the top, bottom, left, and right. For this example, from the text view to its parent, the constraint layout, or to the next button for the bottom constraint. Number 3, notice that the blueprint and the design views also show the constraints when a particular view is selected. Some of the constraints are jagged lines, but the ones next to the next button is a squiggle because it's a little different. You'll learn more about that in a bit. Once again, to see the blueprint, all you do is click this button here. And you see there's a blueprint. And here is your design. So the blueprint, now that I'm thinking about it, just sort of mimics what your screen looks like without any of this added color, added fonts, so on and so forth. So you can see exactly just a regular standard, basically a blueprint, like, like the skeleton bones of your app. Step 2, you're going to add buttons and constrain their positions. To learn how to use constraints to connect the positions of views to each other, you will add buttons to the layout. Your first goal is to add a button and some constraints and change the constraints to the next button. Number 1, notice the palette at the top left of the layout editor. Move the sides if you need to so that you can see many of the items in the palette. So the palette's in the top left of the layout editor, right here. When it's saying move is if you can't see, like say your thing was covered, move it, adjust it accordingly so you can see all of it. Let's click on some of the categories and scroll the listed items if needed to get an idea of what's available. Okay, it wants me to go over this. So common ones here are basically common ones that people use. You have a text view, which we're using with the hello world. You have a button, which we have for the next button. And then there's more like the image view if you want to put an image inside. You will learn what a recycler view is later. Same thing with fragment, scroll, and then the switch. Those are all common buttons that are used within apps, and they put it here because they know people developing apps are using these frequently. So it's there in that comment section. Text, these are all the different kinds of text views. You have the text view, which we see here. We have a plain text. We have a password. So if we're trying to add password entrance, we have an email field, phone, postal address, time, date, number sign, number decimal, basically all pretty self-explanatory for texts that you could have on an app. Same thing with buttons. We have a button, which we have right now, which is our next button. We have an image button. So like when you click an image and it's actually a button and it sends you to another page, that's what that button does. Same thing here is a checkbox. You'll learn what radios, toggles, switches are later. Widgets kind of work in a similar sense. These are image views, videos, all within widgets. You'll learn those definitions later. Layouts, which are constraint layouts. If we wanted to create something else in a component tree, we have a linear layout, frame layout, guideline. They all have different properties, but they all do one of the same thing in a different way, basically. We're working with constraint layout, as you see right now. We also have containers. Like I said, a lot of this you will find out later, like what the recycle view is. Here's an app bar layout. So, if you want to edit some of your app bars, bottom app bar, navigation, toolbars, these are all different containers. Google, I guess this has you a map, add. And then these are just grids. So these are the different kinds of options you have within your palette. And going through courses, you get to learn and how to work with all of them. Obviously, the course we're going through right now is teaching us how to use some of them, but not all of them at the moment. All right. Step 3, select button, which is near the top, and drag and drop it onto the design view, placing it underneath the text view near the other button. So this is that dragged out button. We're going to put it somewhere in the middle here, underneath the text view near the other button. So let me do that. If you go to comment, there's a button right there. Click it, drag it. I'm going to place it right next to the next button. And now we created, as if you look in the component tree, we created a new button. So we have our text view, our button first, and this new button that we just created. As it states here, notice that the button has been added to the component tree. Step 3, add a constraint to the new button. You will now constrain the top of the button to the bottom of the text view. Move the cursor over to the circle at the top of the button. Click and drag the circle at the top of the button onto the circle at the bottom of the text view. So like this picture shows. Take that button here and drag it to the bottom of Hello World. It's probably going to do that. The button moves up to sit just below the text view because the top of the button is now constrained to the bottom of the text view. Take a look at the constraint widget in the layout pane of the attributes panel. It shows some constraints for the button, including top, bottom of text view. The step 5 also says take a look at the XML code for the button. It now includes the attribute that constrains the top of the button to the bottom of the text view. All right. So now we can see here on this button, it has the constraint right here, bottom at ID text view. And then if we go to our XML code, we notice that button has been added here. And we notice that right here, our layout constraint has been added to the text view. And we did that just by dragging. Okay. Step 6, you may see a warning not horizontally constrained. To fix this, add a constraint from the left side of the button to the left side of the screen. Also add a constraint to constrain the bottom of the button to the bottom of the screen. It wants us to do that to the right, and then this to the bottom. And it probably will cover your next button, but don't worry about that for now. We'll fix it. Actually, it only said left, so let me just take the right one off. Perfect. All right, so if you ever get in an error or something's not working, just go ahead and feel free to delete it and redo it. Now I have all my 3 constraints without that right one. And we should be where we are now. Yep, step 6 was to fix the add constraint to the left side of the button, and then add a constraint to the bottom. Okay, before adding another button, relabel this button so things are a little clearer about which button it is. Click on the button you just added in the design layout. Look at the attributes panel on the right and notice the ID field. Change the ID from button to toast button. Toast_button. So click button here. We notice there's an ID right here up top in the attributes. We're going to change that to toast_button. Just like that. Press enter. And now we see our ID has been changed to toast button. ID basically means that we identify that button as the toast button. So ID identification. Step 4, adjust the next button. You will adjust the button labeled next, which Android Studio created for you when you created the project. The constraint between it and the text view looks a little different. A wavy line instead of a jagged one with no arrow. This indicates a chain where the constraints link two or more objects to each other, instead of just one to another. For now, you'll delete the chain constraints and replace them with regular constraints. To delete a constraint, in the design view or blueprint view, hold Control key, Command on a Mac, and move the cursor over the circle for the constraint until the circle highlights, then click the circle. Oh, I could have done that and used this piece of information earlier. All right, well, let's do that. Yeah, I'm holding Control and it's highlighting. Okay, so it does go back right behind that button. Another way to do it, I guess, is to click on one of the constraint views, then right-click on the constraint and select Delete from menu. Or in the Attributes panel, move the cursor over the circle for the constraint until it shows X, then click it. So let me go here. As you see, the constraint's not there in our layout. I'm going to Command Z and put it back. And you see there is one here. Now if I click that X, there it goes. This states if you delete a constraint and want it back, either undo the action or create a new constraint. Step 5, delete the chain constraints. Click on the next button and then delete the constraint from the top of the button to the text view. So make sure right here, they're different. Your toast button looks like this. Your button has that wavy looking constraint there. And they want us to delete this. It should be in your button first. So we're deleting that constraint up top. I'm going to hold Control and delete it. And there you go. Now we're going to click on the text view and delete the constraint from the bottom of the text to the next button. So we'll click up here to the text view. Right here is the one connecting to the next button. Hold Control or Command if you have a Mac. And there's the X. And now they're not connected anymore. And yes, this is going to happen to your screen as well. Now we're going to add new constraints. Step 6. Constrain the right side of the next button to the right of the screen if it isn't already. So let's go over to our next button. That's button first. Drag this to the right. There you go. Number 2, delete the constraint on the left side of the next button. Our left constraint right here. Delete it. Number 3, now constrain the top and bottom of the next button so that the top of the button is constrained to the bottom of the text view and the bottom is constrained to the bottom of the screen. The right side of the button is constrained to the right side of the screen. Take this, drag it up to Hello World. The bottom is connected to the bottom, and the right is connected to the right. Nothing on that left at the moment. Number 4, also constrain the text view to the bottom of the screen. So both are going to connect to the bottom of the screen. It may seem like the views are jumping around a lot, but that's normal as you add and remove constraints. Your layout should look something like this. So let me constrain this text view to the bottom of the screen. Also, if you click just right here, it'll bring you to the text view. You don't have to go over here. If you simply just click on it, it should bring you to that field. So we take this bottom and drag it to the bottom, and there we go. Now we're all where we should be. Step 7, extract string resources. In the fragment first XML layout file, find the text property for the toast button. Okay, here's our button, add ID toast button. See it right here, Android ID. We changed it to toast button. Notice that the text button is directly in the layout field. Instead of referencing a string resource as the text view does, this will make it harder to translate your app to other languages. To fix this, click the highlighted code. A light bulb appears on the left. Okay, hold on. All right, let's see. Here's the yellow light bulb. It says hard-coded string button should reference at string. Click the light bulb in the menu that pops up. Select extract string resource. So right here, we'll click this. Okay. It's not showing up. Oh, there you go. Click the actual bulb. Extract string resource. Make sure I'm doing this right. In the dialog box that appears, change the resource name to toast underscore button underscore text and the resource value to toast and click OK. Okay. Toast underscore button underscore text. Resource value is going to be toast. Source set stays main, file strings. That's this right here. Yep. Toast. Now we're going to click OK. You should notice now that the value of the Android text property has changed to add string / toast button text. Yep. Add string / toast button text. Perfect. Step 7, go to the res value strings XML file Notice that a new string resource has been added named toast button text. That's over here. Values, not styles, strings. Yep. Right in our Strings XML, we see we have a new string name for toast button text. So we created a new string, and it's right here. Okay, step 8, we're going to run the app to make sure it displays as you expected it to. I'll run it. There you go. We have a toast, and we have a next, and we have our hello world in the center. You now know how to create new string resources by extracting them from existing field files. You can also add new resources to the strings.xml files manually. And you know how to change the ID of a view. So what that means is we learned how to change and create a string this way without having to go here to create it. And we also learned right here how to change the ID. Okay, here's a note here. It says the ID for a view helps you identify that view distinctively from other views. You'll use this later to find particular views using the find view by ID method in your Java code. So when you're working with a certain view, these are all called views. When you're working, say, if you want to make some code for the next button to go and work in this way, you want to find that ID, you want to find this next button by ID. So that's what we did right now. Step 8, we're going to update the next button. The next button already has its text in the string resource, but you'll make some changes to the button to match its new role, which will be to generate and display a random number. So to do that, we're going to do from step 1 here. As you did for the toast button, we're going to change the ID of the next button from button first to random button in the attributes panel. So we'll do that. Button first. Let's change this to, was it random button? Random underscore button. Press enter. Click yes. If you get a dialog box asking to update all usages of the button, click yes. This will fix any other references to the button in the project code. Step 3, in Strings XML, right-click on the next string resource. Wait, which one was that to? Okay, right-click the next string resource, select refactor, rename, and change the name to random button.text. Okay, so right-click the next string resource, right here, I believe. Refactor, rename, and you should pop up into something like this. We're going to rename this to random underscore button underscore text. Now it's changing all the naming. And there we are. Now the string name random button text that shows the word next in the button is now renamed to random button text. We're going to change the value of the string from next to random. So inside where this blue lettering is, where it says next, delete that and put random. You don't have to press enter. All you got to do is change it. It says step 7 here. If you want, move random button text to below toast button text. We don't need to do that, but we would just copy this and move it over below this right here. Step 9, we're going to add a third button now. Oh, let's go look at the screen. Make sure that things have been changed. We'll go to our first fragment. As you see now, our button no longer says next, it says random. If I click random button, ID random button, go over to my layout code. At ID now is random button. Android text is random. Android text at string random button text. So everything we did is now implemented in the way it needs to be. Perfect. So your final layout will have 3 buttons vertically constrained, the same, and evenly spaced from each other. In fragment first, XML, add another button to the layout and drop it somewhere between the toast button and the random button below the text view. So just like we dragged out that button earlier, we're going to do the same thing. We'll go right there. Step 2, add vertical constraints, the same as the other 2 buttons. Constrain the top of the third button to the bottom of the text view. Constrain the bottom of the third button to the bottom of the screen. Add horizontal constraints from the third button to the other buttons, constraining the left side of the third button to the right side of the toast button. Constrain the right side of the third button to the left side of the random button. I'll go and do that right here. So here we have our 4 constraints. We're going to take this and drag it to Hello World. Take the bottom one, drag it to the bottom of the screen. Take the left, drag it to the right of toast. Take the right, drag it to the left of random. And now we have our 4 constraints. Your layout should look something like this. So far, so good. Step 5, examine the XML code for fragment first, .xml. Do any of the buttons have the attribute app layout constraint vertical bias? It's okay if you do not see that constraint. Let's see what this is. The bias constraints allow you to tweak the position of a view to be more on one side than the other when both sides are constrained in opposite directions. For example, if both the top and bottom sides of a view are constrained to the top and bottom of the screen, you can use a vertical bias to place the view more towards the top than the bottom. Here's the XML code for the finished layout. Your layout might have different margins and perhaps some different vertical and horizontal bias constraints. The exact values of the attributes for the appearance of the text view might be different for your app. All right, so this is the layout for your text view, your button, and your 3 buttons. So they should be very similar to toast button text, random button text, and then our third button, which we have not edited. We haven't edited yet. Here's your text view. If we go to mine, text view, button, button, button. Okay. Step 10. Get your UI ready for the next task. The next task is to make the buttons do something when they are pressed. First, you need to get the UI ready. Change the text of the text view to show 0, the number 0. Change the ID of the last button you added, button 2, to count button in the attributes panel in the design editor. All right, let's do this first. Change the text of the text view to show 0. I want to say right here, if we put 0, let me see. Yep. So if you look in our common attributes of the text view, go to your text view. Scroll down till you get to common attributes. There's a text with a little wrench. Put 0 in there and press enter. And as you see now, it has a 0 there. We're going to change the ID of the last button we added, button 2, to count button in the attributes panel in the design editor. Back up here, scroll up. Right here, ID. Count button. Count underscore button. Enter. In the XML, extract the string resources to count button text and set the value to count. Just like we did earlier. Scroll down to your button here in the file. Here's the little light bulb. Oh, why am I having trouble all the time with this? There you go. Extract string resource. Resource name was, let me see. Count button text, and we're going to set the value to count. Is that with capital? We want to be as precise as possible. All underscore. Count underscore button underscore text. And the resource value, I believe, is count, right? Yep. Set value to count. There you go. Click OK. Button should now have the following text and IDs. Left button toast, add ID toast button, middle button count, add ID count button, right button random, ID random button. So let's check that. Yep. toast for toast. Middle button says count, should be count button. Count button. Right button random should be random button. And there you go. Let's run the app. I'll do that. And there you go. Uh-oh, mine says hello world. Here, we could go to our strings and look for hello first fragment. All right, so this is where we're going to edit it and put it in a 0. Now that should fix the problem within our strings. And now let's run. There we go. Now we're 0. So to fix that, my apologies. You'll go to your strings, your hello first fragment, change that inside the blue text here to 0 from the hello world that we had it before. And that'll fix our app. Perfect. All right. Okay, so step 11 is if we had to fix any errors. This means if we had any constraints or edits or errors, it'll tell us. And it shows us how to do it. But I didn't have any errors, so I'm just going to move on. By the way you can tell if you had errors or not is when you run it, it's building your project, install successfully, finished. That means that your code is working, and it'll also bring up that Gradle error 0, and your app will run. If you don't get to this page, that means that there's an error. But if you do, you're good to go.